This is about my fantasy novel, Lightstone of Power. For a couple of years, it was completely dead. I'd given up on it, and it was just sitting there, collecting digital dust in my hard drive. And I was sure it would never be read again. I was convinced it was a total failure and that the dream for this book was over. But then I tried something new, something that I had dismissed almost entirely. And this is the story of how a simple newsletter platform brought my biggest creative project back to life, back from the dead. And if you have a project sitting in a digital graveyard right now, this just might be the story that you need to hear. The graveyard. Every writer has one. It's that folder on your computer that's filled with the ghosts of stories that just didn't make it. For me, the biggest tombstone in that graveyard belonged to a full-length fantasy novel, the first one that I had ever finished. I had poured my entire soul into that book. It had everything. It had a sprawling world. It had this great magic system that I was proud of. And the characters, sometimes they felt more real to me than people I know in real life. I had spent years of nights and weekends and tears and laughter building this story from the ground up. I was totally convinced that this was the one. You know, to get a story going, you kind of have to be obsessed with it. And I was. I loved the story. I loved the world. But you know, love isn't always enough when you're a writer. I finished the first draft. I was really proud of it. And a publisher even expressed interest in it. And for a moment, it felt like my dream was coming true. But then the publisher had some internal difficulties and they decided to refocus their business. So I never got the contract. And that silence after getting so close to seeing my dream realized, silence was deafening. And I had this self-doubt that started to creep in. What if the story wasn't good enough? What if it wasn't any good at all? What if nobody wanted to read it? And I had read horror stories about publishing and how now I had one of my own. I had a rejection that had nothing to do with the book itself. And these publishing gatekeepers felt like giants that I would never be able to get past. So I started tinkering. I rewrote the beginning. And then I rewrote it again, and I ran it past my critique partners, and my obsession spiraled into a frustration until the joy of creating was completely replaced by the anxiety of trying to make the story perfect. So I came to a point where I made a hard decision, and I set the book aside. It was way easier to let it die than to face the idea of rejection once again. I told myself, well, you know, some projects just weren't meant to see the light. Sometimes they just have to wait. Sometimes they just need to go in a quiet corner and die somewhere. But I didn't stop writing. In fact, I wrote and self-published Soul Designers, a science fiction novel that I'm really proud of. And it ended up being a finalist in the Realm Awards. And I even started planning and working on a brand new 6-book fantasy series that I'm writing now. But that first novel, it was officially in the graveyard. And a part of my creative spirit was buried there, right beside it. And it sat there. The silent reminder of a dream that I had walked away from. And every time I looked at it, it bugged me and it reminded me that I had walked away from what I believed in. Well, I tried to move on. I was proud of my science fiction book, Soul Designers, and I was excited about the new fantasy series that I was working on. But nothing had that same fire as that first book. And the ghost of that first fantasy world, it just wouldn't leave me alone, even when I found other successes. And then one day, I found what I thought was the perfect solution: Kindle Vella. This was Amazon's platform for serializing fiction, and I was really excited to give it a try when I found it. But within a very short time of starting, I received an email from Amazon that said they were discontinuing the platform. Really? Once again, I had hit a brick wall with this book, and it felt like this huge cosmic joke. I'm like, what in the world is going on with this thing? But that brief experiment with Kindle Vella had planted a seed that had started to grow. If I could do this on Kindle Vella, why not somewhere else? And that's when I started seeing people talking about Substack. And at first I thought, that's just for journalists or alternative media or tech bros writing about productivity hacks or business. You know, serializing fiction is kind of like the old glory days, something out of history books. It felt like reminding me Charles Dickens would serialize. I think he serialized fiction. I know some of the greats did. But so this idea stuck in my head. What if? If they could do it, why couldn't I? What if I didn't need a gatekeeper for this story? What if I could just put it out there myself? Not as a finished book, but chapter by chapter. Well, the thought was a little terrifying, but after the Vella shut down, it also felt like a lifeline. And it was an experiment, one last shot to see if there was any pulse left in this old manuscript. So with butterflies in the pit of my stomach and a tiny spark of hope, I decided I'd give it a try. And the things that I learned along the way have been pretty unexpected. And I want to share with you some of the lessons that I learned resurrecting my novel. If you're a writer who's ever felt stuck, or you're just curious about new ways to share your work, I think these lessons will be incredibly valuable for you. So stick around, and hey, if you like what you hear, think about subscribing to follow the rest of my journey. So here's what I learned about resurrecting my novel. Lesson number 1 was, you don't need permission to hit publish. Yeah, I said it. The biggest mental hurdle I had to clear was this idea of gatekeepers. For years, I was waiting for an agent or a publisher to tell me that my work was good enough to be read. Even though I had people around me who said they loved my work. But Substack, it just walks right around that wall. You see, the Substack platform lets you build a direct line to your audience. You have your own mailing list. You control how everything looks and feels. And the second that I hit publish on my little intro post, I felt this weight just lift off my shoulders. It wasn't about getting a book deal anymore. It was just about sharing a story that I dearly loved, and I wanted others to come to love it too. I wanted to see if they would love it too. And that mental shift, it changed everything. It's not that traditional publishing is bad. Oh, far from it. I'm reading traditionally published books all day long. Some of my favorite writers are traditionally published. But waiting for the process can become a really bad habit. And it can be a reason to keep your work locked away forever when you're not getting any traction, trying to find publishers or agents. It's also a very long process to get from concept to market. When you serialize fiction and post a chapter a week, it might not make you a bestseller, but it does guarantee that your story is going to get read. And it builds community. And that is a really powerful thing. The second lesson I learned through this process was that a buffer is your absolute best friend when it comes to serializing fiction on Substack. In my first wave of excitement, I was tempted to just start posting chapters from my finished manuscript. In my case, I was fortunate because I had the complete novel already written and professionally edited before I published my first chapter online. But I read some advice from some other writers who were doing serials, and this is probably the most important step if you're starting from scratch, and that is to make sure you build a buffer before you launch. The consensus is to have 10 or 15 chapters completely written and edited before you launch. It might take you a few months, but it's really an absolute game changer. It saves you from the stress of a weekly deadline, which can kill your work's quality. You see, a lot of fiction writers on Substack are releasing fully polished novels. So the readers there expect a certain high level of quality, and you don't want to disappoint them. And this buffer makes sure that you can deliver, it keeps you sane, and it gives you some room to breathe, which is really important in the creative process. The third lesson was that finding readers is a slow but rewarding climb. Substack isn't TikTok, people. There is no magic algorithm that's going to make you go viral overnight. It's true. Fiction is, in fact, a growing category on the platform, though. So building an audience, it will be a little bit slower than if it was for, say, a business Substack newsletter or some other kind of writing newsletter. You have to be ready to bring your first readers with you. So for me, I started with my friends and family and my email list, which you can import to Substack. And then I started looking into the platform's tools, and I've just discovered Substack has a recommendation feature where other newsletters can recommend yours, and I look forward to making the most of that. I'm still fairly new on the platform, but I'm looking forward to teaming up with other Christian fantasy writers, and if that's you, reach out to me. I'd love to connect. But the platform has other discovery features too, like notes, and these hold good promise for driving new subscriptions. I've learned that building an audience is a marathon and not a sprint. It's never too late to get started. It's about finding your true fans and that small, dedicated group that loves what you do and they're excited to be along for the ride. And let me tell you, getting a heartfelt message from someone who loves your world is way more rewarding than a number on a screen. So, lesson number 4 was to master the art of the serial. I'm not talking about breakfast cereal. Writing for a weekly serial is a totally different skill than writing a book that's read all at once. And I figured out that the sweet spot for a serialized chapter is about 1,200 to 1,500 words. That's long enough to be satisfying, but it's short enough to be read in one sitting from an email. Also, every single chapter needs to have its very own little story arc. So I started structuring my posts with a quick summary, a strong hook at the start to pull people back in to the story, and then a killer cliffhanger at the end to make them desperate for next week's email. And this rhythm will build a habit for your readers where your story becomes part of their routine, becomes part of their life. I also created a running index that appears at the top of every chapter post so that new subscribers can very easily start from the beginning or wherever they left off. And these are just little tips and tools that can make a huge difference in making your newsletter feel like a professional publication. The fifth and final lesson that I learned in serializing fiction on Substack is that your readers can become your co-pilots. This is really fun. This was one of the biggest draws for me, actually, and it's the part that I'm most excited to see grow. With traditional publishing, so often you end up writing in a cave for years. It's very solitary work. But when you serialize fiction on Substack, there's this incredible potential for instant feedback. And as I grow on this platform and gain more readers, I'm really looking forward to hearing more from them. Other authors have reported how the comments section can become an incredible source of motivation for them, and I can see why. Hearing what readers think, seeing them point out little details that they loved and ask questions about the characters and try to guess what's coming next. That feedback loop seems like the most motivating thing in the world. And the novel at that point stops becoming a static file on my computer and turns into a living, breathing world that I can explore with my audience and my readers. So where am I now? Well, that file that was gathering digital dust is now a living project with a growing community of people who are actually invested in this world that I have built. I have a schedule, I have accountability, but more than anything, I have my passion back. Hitting publish every week and seeing those early signs of a growing community, that's completely revived my love for the project and for the story. And it's alive, not because a publisher said that it could be, but because a community of readers is starting to say yes to this story. Before, it was just me alone, staring at my laptop, crippled by self-doubt, and now it's me connected to readers all over the world, building this world together. And it's not even about the money, although you can monetize on Substack. It's really about the connection. It's really about the pure joy of creating again. And Substack gave me a way to escape the pressure and just share my work. And the project that I had declared dead was brought back to life, not by some lightning strike in a storm, but by the simple, steady act of sharing it with others. It has new life, and I couldn't be more thrilled. So in conclusion, my story isn't about getting famous overnight. It's definitely not a get-rich-quick scheme. This is the story of passion. This is the story of how changing my mindset and trying a new platform saved a project that I loved from the graveyard. The serialization process keeps me moving forward while building a community. And it proved to me that you don't need anyone's permission to be a writer. You just need to write. And you need to find a way to let people read it. And for me, Substack is one of those ways. It's become a very valuable way for me to build a community. So after the serialization is complete on Lightstone of Power, I will be publishing the novel in book form and offering it for sale. These serialized chapters on Substack will always be free, but the monetization that Substack offers allows me to open the door for others to support my work along the way and become founding members of my community, and to have a say in this world that I'm building. So if you have a loved story that's gathering digital dust on your hard drive, maybe it's not really dead. Maybe it's just waiting for a different kind of life. Maybe it's just waiting for you to give it one more chance. And if you want to see what comes out of this whole experiment of mine, if you want to dive into a new fantasy world and read the very novel that this story is about, I would be honored to have you. The link to my Substack is in the description, and you can subscribe for free and get a new chapter every single week. Join our little community, and let's see where this story goes together. Until next time, I'm Donna Watson, and I write stories of hope and light.